Today on Super Mystery Bros. They say that everybody's life ends, but nobody ever completes it. Since the dawn of time, humans have tried to solve the world's greatest mystery: what happens after you die? Theories are plentiful, but answers are few. Do ghosts of the dead sometimes linger? Are ghost sightings caused by some sort of glitch in our reality? Or is the explanation for ghost sightings just a psychological coping mechanism to help us deal with the fact that someday we're all gonna die? Join us tonight as we talk about the history and paranormal phenomenon of what some consider to be the most haunted house in America, the Whaley House. Welcome back to episode 14 of Super Mystery Bros, and tonight we're glad to have you here with us. My name is Nate, and with me is my Soviet comrade Ivan, and together, we're the Super Mystery Bros. Ivan, what can our listeners do to help us on our journey into the ghostly world of the unknown?
First, rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts, rate the show on Spotify, and of course, tell your friends, your family, your cat, your dog, etc.
And do we discriminate? Do we want everyone to rate and review the show, or only certain types of people?
Let me think about it. Everyone.
Everyone. Yeah, like, we don't care if you're ugly. We don't care if you smell bad. We're just going to appreciate whatever you write in the review comment box, just the same as if you were a beautiful person who smelled nice. So please, even if you're ugly, you smell bad, whatever the case may be, please leave a rating and review. And we'd really appreciate it. All right, man, are you ready to get started on this mystery?
Yeah, let's get it started.
San Diego. It's been called America's finest city, Fighter Town, USA, and most recently, a whale's vagina. When Kyle and I grew up there, it was a great place to live, full of sunshiny days, smiling faces, and delicious burritos. But in modern times, there's only 4 types of people who live there: Marines, sailors, the super wealthy, and tweakers, with few exceptions. I personally haven't lived there in over 7 years, but from what I understand, it's really gone to hell in a handbasket. Kyle, our other co-host, just recently had his truck broken into in his once decent neighborhood, a neighborhood where children once played freeze tag and wiffle ball in the street, completely carefree. But now, it's a really great place for tweakers and other assorted riffraff to go break into people's cars and pitch a tent under an overpass, a place where hardworking, honest, gainfully employed people can pay over $2,000 a month to live in some shitty, dilapidated studio apartment surrounded by hordes of ne'er-do-wells who make their living by stealing copper wire from construction sites and busting out car windows to steal the loose change out of people's ashtrays. However, the city government just came up with a bulletproof solution to the crisis by making homeless encampments illegal. Sorry, riffraff, but I hear Los Angeles is a really nice place, and we here at Super Mystery Bros highly recommend heading there instead. San Diego is world famous for its beach culture, the San Diego Zoo, SeaWorld, and the 1995 tank rampage, where some renegade tweaker stole an army tank from the National Guard Armory and went on a rampage through the city streets, knocking down traffic lights and crushing parked cars. Beyond the zoo, its crowded beaches, rich history, and perfect weather, there's actually many other things to do and see all over this great and beautiful city. Experience the thrill of going to Petco Park to watch the Padres play baseball, surrounded by a crowd of tens of thousands who are there to cheer for the opposing team. Or go for a hike through the beautiful Mission Trails Regional Park. The possibilities are endless. Or, take it from me, dear listener, if you're looking for a good time amongst a beautiful historic backdrop, look no further than Old Town. Appropriately named as it's literally the oldest part of the city, the nucleus of what would later become the city of San Diego as we know it today. In Old Town San Diego, just south of the 8 freeway and east of the 5, is a comfy little section of the city that to step into is like taking a step back in time, as the architecture and culture of the area has remained true to its Old West and Mexican roots. A beautiful little piece of the city that remains an absolute gem to this day, where you can enjoy some excellent Mexican cuisine, sip on a comically huge margarita, and then stumble around drunk looking at all the old buildings and knick-knack shops that sell little trinkets to dumb tourists. But deep inside the nucleus of America's finest city lies a dark and sinister history. A history so sinister that you might think twice about bringing your Ouija board with you on your trip. In this very special part of the city sits Southern California's oldest brick building, known as the Whaley House. What once was an amalgamation of a family home, a city courthouse, a theater, a general store, and a school is now considered by some to be America's most haunted house. And to step into it would mean putting your very ass on the line. So, Ivan, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of this area?
Yep. Prior to European settlement, the area of San Diego was home to the Kumaya Indian people. Early Spanish settlers came to the area in the 18th century and established two missions. Mission San Diego de Alcala in the east, in an area known as Mission Valley, and San Diego Presidio right next to the old town. By 1850, California was admitted into the United States, and Old Town became the county seat of San Diego County. At the time, San Diego only had 650 residents, a far cry from today. So with that, dear listener, you might be thinking to yourself, hey, that doesn't sound so bad. How could this place possibly be the most haunted location in San Diego, let alone the United States? Trust us when we say, the rabbit hole goes much, much deeper.
In the summer of 1852, a tall, blonde-haired Canadian man by the name of Yankee Jim Robinson arrived in San Diego. The origin story of his colorful nickname and why he was called that in the first place is unclear and remains a mystery. It's also unclear why he decided to come to San Diego in the first place. However, what is clear is that while in San Diego, he thought it would be a good idea to steal somebody's boat, the 30-ton pilot boat Plutus, which was docked in the San Diego Bay. He was caught in the act, but managed to escape from a crowd of vigilantes on a rowboat, crossing the bay and landing in Point Loma, but was ultimately found when he begged a rancher for some food and water. When the rancher soon realized that this stranger was the man that the other locals were looking for, he grabbed a sword and went after Yankee Jim. Yankee Jim attempted to flee from the ranch, but was struck over the head by the rusty sword and was then tied to a mule and taken into town.
Some insist that Yankee Jim was a good guy who got caught up in a single act of stupidity, an otherwise law-abiding man who had momentary lapse of reason. Other historians speculate that Yankee Jim was part of a group of men who were committing a crime spree all the way down to the coast of California, with plans of then retiring with their ill-gotten gains down in Mexico. However, what is clear is that Yankee Jim Robinson's luck ran out on that August day in 1852. He, along with two of his friends, were swiftly placed on trial. Yankee Jim was in disbelief. He initially thought that the entire thing was some sort of a sick joke to scare him, and he had to be reminded by the judge several times, who was drunk during the trial, to stop laughing. Judge was drunk?
Yeah, the judge was drunk during the trial.
All right. What's like a regular thing?
This is the 1850s, man.
Oh, okay. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty and recommended the death penalty. Yankee Jim was then sentenced to die by hanging the following day.
At the time, San Diego didn't have a jail to house him in, and so he was chained to a tree overnight while he was awaiting execution. It was August 18th, 1852, and the day of reckoning had come for Yankee Jim. Making the story all the more tragic for him was the fact that due to his tall stature, the scaffolding was not high enough for him to die swiftly. In the mid-1800s, the average height for a man was only about 5'3" to 5'5", but Yankee Jim was over 6 feet tall. So instead of a quick drop and merciful snap of his neck, he landed with his toes grazing the ground and slowly and horrifyingly strangled to death over a period of more than 30 minutes. Yankee Jim Robinson was buried in Campo Santo Cemetery, just about 600 feet from where the Whaley House currently stands, down San Diego Avenue. His grave remains there, which you can still visit to this day. So, for a brief history of the Whaley House, we're going to read an excerpt from WhaleyHouseSanDiego.com. Ivan, why don't you kick off the first part?
On May 6, 1856, Thomas Whaley began construction on his new home and proclaimed, quote, "My new house, when completed, will be the handsomest, most comfortable and convenient place in town or within 150 miles of here," end quote. The two-story Greek Revival house was designed by Thomas Whaley and made from bricks created in Whaley's very own brickyard on Conde Street. Furnished with mahogany and rosewood furniture, Brussels carpets, and costing more than $10,000 upon completion, the Whaley's house was overwhelmingly praised as the first of its kind and finest home in Southern California.
The Whaley House was a central pillar amongst the Old Town San Diego community. From 1857 to the early part of the 20th century, the Whaley House became the gathering place for the entire San Diego community. Besides being the Whaley family home, it was also San Diego's first commercial theater, the second county courthouse, and a bilingual general store. The home became such an integral part of the community that it was later the focal point in a battle between Old Town residents and New Town residents. More on this later. The San Diego County government had been renting a portion of the Whaley House for its offices and records. Whaley offered several times to sell the house to the county, but the offer was ignored. Newtowners demanded that the county offices and records be moved to Newtown. Despite threats of armed resistance from the Old Towners, the records were moved on March 31st, 1871, effectively shifting the focus of the city to Newtown. So before we move on here, I just want to clarify, Newtown is what we now know as downtown San Diego, just to put some context there. So Ivan, why don't you keep going?
Although the Whaley House was a communal treasure, it primarily served as the residential home for Thomas Whaley and his family. Thomas Whaley arrived in California around 1849 during the famous California Gold Rush. Upon arrival, he set up a store with George Wardle on Montgomery Street in San Francisco. It was there where he sold hardware and woodwork from his family New York business, Pye and Whaley, right? As well as offering mining equipment and utensils on consignment. Born on October 5th, 1823, the young entrepreneur came from a Scots-Irish family which emigrated to Plymouth, Massachusetts, in 1722. Alexander Whaley, his grandfather, was a gunsmith and participated in the Boston Tea Party. It was during the Revolutionary War where he provided
flintlock
muskets for soldiers and the use of his house on Long Island by General George Washington. Thomas's father, Thomas Whaley, carried on the family. Man, I feel like I'm getting some low energy here, man.
You're good, man. You're good.
Okay. Thomas Whaley. Whaley comes from whale.
Yeah.
Thomas Whaley carried on the family gunsmith business and served in the New York militia during the War of 1812. He married Rachel Pye. whose father, William, manufactured locks in Brooklyn.
Whaley's entrepreneurial spirit and sharp business acumen, acquired in part from his education at the Washington Institute, helped him flourish in San Francisco. Thomas Whaley capitalized on his success by establishing his own store on Montgomery Street. After an arson set fire destroyed his buildings on Montgomery Street in May of 1851, he relocated to San Diego upon the advice of Louis Franklin, a merchant who operated stores in San Francisco and in Old Town San Diego. Whaley set up various businesses with Franklin, Ephraim Morse, Francis Hinton, and even his brother Henry, and amassed enough money to return to New York to marry his sweetheart, Anna Eloise Delaunay, the daughter of French-born parents, on May 14, 1853.
Shortly after marriage in 1855, Thomas and Anna returned to San Diego. It was then that Thomas Whaley purchased the land and set forth on his journey to build the finest home in California. By 1858, Thomas and Anna Whaley had produced 3 children: Francis Hinton, named for a business partner, Thomas, who died at just 18 months, and Anna Amelia. Later in life, the Whaleys welcomed 3 more children: George Hayes Ringgold, named for a business partner again, Violet Eloise, and Corinne Lillian. Thomas Whaley, the family patriarch, an absolute pillar of the San Diego community, was born in New York City in 1823, was well educated, and even spent 2 years of his life traveling in Europe. Upon the outbreak of California gold rush, which began in 1849, he set off to San Francisco to become an entrepreneur. In summer of 1851, Mr. Whaley's business associates set off down the coast of California on a trading vessel, while Mr. Whaley remained in San Francisco. However, his associates, upon reaching San Diego, liked it so much that they even decided to stay and plant their flag there instead. Mr. Whaley's soon followed and made his trip down to San Diego in October of that year, and he and an associate opened a store called Tienda California. It ended up being a financial success, making Whaley's a wealthy man. Mr. Whaley went back to New York City in 1853, where he married his wife, Anna A. Laney, who became Anna Whaley, before returning to San Diego with his new wife. Shortly before the birth of their first child, the Whaleys moved back to the Whaley House on Juan Street, which was opposite to their store.
In a letter he wrote to his mother on May 6, 1856, Whaley wrote the following, quote, "I have a fine lot, 150 by 217 and a half, which I shall enclose with a wall sometime this year. I am now building a granary of brick, which will hold 300,000 or 400,000 pounds of grain. I shall put up sheds for hay, a house, and a store of brick." The lot Whaley referred to in the letter was Lot 1, Block 27, which was one of the lots he purchased for $302. As fate would have it, as previously mentioned, this was the site of Yankee Jim's hanging a few years earlier. By September 1856, he later reported, quote, "I have commenced erecting a 2-story building, 32 by 44, to serve as a house and a store. It is to be completed by May 1858, as my lease expires by then. I feel I will have the nicest place in San Diego. It will cost several $1,000s, but I have the bricks and I will pay for the labor and store trade. I must wait patiently until it is known that this is to be the terminus of the railroad. I feel that San Diego, with its climate and bay, can become a teeming metropolis. It has the same possibilities as New York." End quote. On February 9th, 1857, he wrote, quote, "My new house and store will be soon completed, and when finished will be the handsomest and most convenient and comfortable place in this section of the country or within 150 miles of here." End quote.
Ultimately, Mr. Whaley was successful in his endeavor. And the home was finally completed later that summer in August of 1857. It was located on the corner of San Diego Avenue and Harney Street, with the front facing San Diego Avenue. It was a beautiful red brick Greek revival style home, 2 stories, with a full covered veranda in the front, supported by white posts. Sounds awesome. However, the location proved to be inconvenient for a store as it was too far away from the plaza, and so he relocated his store to the Robinson House, which made for a better location, as it was closer to the center of Old Town. Thomas and Anna Whaley had their first child, Francis, in 1854. The couple then had their second child in 1856, a boy named Thomas Jr., while the home was still under construction, but tragically he died at 17 months old in January of 1858. In June of 1858, the couple had their third-born child, a girl named Anna Amelia Whaley. So, just to clarify, the mother's name was also Anna. However, a different kind of tragedy would strike the Whaley family once again when in August of that year, Thomas Whaley woke up in the early morning hours to someone pounding on his window, a local who was trying to wake him up. His store in the plaza was engulfed in flames. Thomas Whaley threw on his clothes and ran outside and was shocked and horrified to see that it was already too late to save his store.
Whaley wrote to his friend George Ringgold, telling him about the bad news and that he would likely end up leaving San Diego to return to San Francisco. After losing their baby and now their store, all in the same year, Thomas and Annie Whaley were at a low point in their lives. The Whaleys did end up leaving San Diego, heading back up to San Francisco, and then Thomas ultimately went up to Alaska, where he was elected to the council in Sitka. Anna and her children remained in San Francisco during this time, staying with Mary Condy Ringgold, who was the widow of Thomas's friend George Ringgold, a lieutenant colonel in the Union Army during the Civil War who was killed in action in June of 1864. Thomas and Anna ended up adopting one of their children, George Hay Ringgold, which again was named after his father. So this gets really confusing, guys. There are a lot of children that are named after their parents, so I just want to bring that up. By 1864, the Whaley family had grown to include Thomas, his wife Anna, their son Francis, born 1854, daughter Anna Amelia, born 1858, George Hay Ringgold, who was their adopted son, born in 1860, Violet Eloise Whaley, born in 1862, and daughter Corinne Lillian, born in 1864. So let's just break this down. So the family matriarch's name is Anna, and then their daughter is also named Anna, but her name is Anna Amelia. And then George Hay Ringgold was the son of George Ringgold, who was a lieutenant colonel who died in the Civil War, and then the Whaley family adopted him as their own son. And then Thomas Jr. was named after his father, Thomas Whaley, but he passed away when he was only 18 months old or so.
Yeah, I feel like this part of our podcast reminds me of what was the first chapter of Bible, man? The second is Exodus. What's the first one?
What part of the Bible are you talking about?
I mean, where they would talk about all the generations of, of the Adam and who came from Adam and Eve, and then
is it like Genesis or something?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
In the Genesis, they would go on and talk about this guy, he had these kids, and then their kids, they had these kids, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's just a lot of moving parts to this story, a lot of different characters with similar names, so just be careful.
It wasn't until 1868 that the Whaleys would return to San Diego, having been away for 10 years, returning to a house that was in dire need of work, having lived through several earthquakes as well as rain damage. But Whaleys eventually repaired the damage and remodeled it. In November of 1868, Thomas Whaley leased the second floor of his house and his corral to a man by the name of Thomas W. Tanner for $20, which allowed him to make an exhibition room and a staircase for a theater production leading up the east wall of the home. The large downstairs room was leased to the County of San Diego as a courtroom from 1869 to 1870, which you can still see today if you visit the home, still furnished with benches and the chair of a judge on a raised platform.
Oh, I also want to mention that last year, the court was actually held in the Whaley House for the first time in over 150 years. So there was one day last year, I think it was last summer, where the Court of San Diego was held in the Whaley House. First time in over 150 years. I thought that was interesting. Go on.
Yep. Upstairs on the second floor was also where county records were kept at the time. Things seemed to be going well for the Whaley family and Old Town San Diego in general. However, it was becoming clear that the political rivalry between the Old Town and so-called, quote, New Town, end quote, was beginning to flare up.
New Town was beginning to grow in size and consisted mainly of Republicans, while Old Town was heavily Democrat and consisted of many people from the South. The New Towners began to demand that the location of county records be moved to Newtown, which the Old Towners vehemently opposed. In the end, the New Towners won out in the elections of 1869 and got their way. A lengthy court battle followed over the next couple years, with the Old Towners even going as far as to state publicly that any attempt to remove the records would be met with armed resistance. Despite these threats, however, the county clerk Scott, along with some other men from Newtown, on the evening of March 31st, 1871, took some wagons over to the Whaley House, held Anna Whaley up at gunpoint, loaded up all of the records, and skedaddled back to Newtown. This incident is also linked to the so-called ninth step of the home, which is where Anna Whaley was held up at gunpoint. The air is often reported as being much colder in this spot than anywhere else in the home.
Thomas Whaley was pissed. After the forcible removal of the records, the county no longer honored the lease they had signed for the storage of records in his house and refused to continue paying him. Thomas Whaley and his business partner eventually moved to Newtown, as it seemed to be inevitable that Newtown was to become the heart of San Diego. However, their venture did not succeed, and shortly afterward he had to travel back to New York to settle his late father's estate. Thomas did not return back to San Diego until 1879.
In 1882, the eldest two Whaley daughters, Violet Eloise and Anna Amelia, were married in a double wedding ceremony. Violet had married a man by the name of George T. Bertolacci, but this marriage was not the happily ever after that Violet had dreamed of. Mr. Bertolacci, as it turned out, was just a con man who was only interested in marrying Violet to get some of the Whaley family's money before fucking off. Just 2 weeks after their wedding, on a train trip back to the East Coast, George abandoned her, which forced her to travel back home alone, which for a young Victorian lady was an absolute humiliation. Divorce was a huge deal in the 1800s, and she was shunned by society for it. Violet, sadly, was never able to overcome the pain that this caused her, and in 1885, she grabbed her father's .32 caliber firearm, walked out to the outhouse, and shot herself in the chest near her heart. Her family carried her back into the house, where she soon passed away.
Her suicide note was a stanza from Bridge of Sighs, a poem by Thomas Hood. It reads as follows: Mad from life's history, swift to death's mystery, glad to be hurled anywhere, out of this world. To add further heartbreak to the story, the youngest daughter, Karin's fiancé, dumped her following Violet's suicide, as he saw this as a giant scandal that he didn't want to be a part of.
In 1890, Thomas Whaley passed away in his and Anna's new home, which was on State Street in Newtown, San Diego. Anna Amelia Whaley passed away in Modesto, California in 1905 due to poor health. So just to clarify, this was the daughter Anna, not the mother. The Whaley House remained neglected and in bad condition for nearly 20 years until their eldest son Francis decided to move back in 1909. Francis got to work restoring the property and entertaining tourists by playing songs on his guitar and telling stories about the house. In the years that followed, most of the remaining members of the Whaley family returned to live in the house and died inside of it. Anna, the family matriarch, eventually passed away in the house in 1913, and Francis died 1 year later in 1914. George, their adopted son, died in 1928, and the last remaining member of the original Whaley family, Corinne Lillian Whaley, lived in the Whaley House until her death in 1953 at the age of 89. She had never been married.
By this point in time, after the passing of Corinne, the house was nearly 100 years old. It was slowly crumbling, and it was a relic of a bygone era. However, in 1956, the Board of Supervisors of the County of San Diego decided to purchase the home and restore it to its original condition. In May of 1960, it was opened as a museum, which you can still visit to this day. Tickets are about $13. You can even buy an after-hours ticket, which gives you access to all of the rooms in the house which are not accessible to the general public during the daytime, where experienced guides can teach you how to use state-of-the-art ghost hunting equipment to find evidence of the home's paranormal activity for yourself, such as FLIR cameras, K2 EMF meters, spirit boxes, and more.
In my own personal experience, I've been in the Whaley House during the daytime, but never at night. So, like, everyone that I know who has been at nighttime says that it's a completely different experience. Because at nighttime, that's supposed to be the most active time for the spirits in the home. So pretty much every San Diegan at least knows somebody who has a Whaley House story. So let's talk about some of the common phenomenon that people allege happens inside of the home. Rumor has it that multiple ghosts still haunt the Whaley House. Yankee Jim Robinson is one of the ghosts that is alleged to haunt the Whaley House. Mainly his footsteps can be heard throughout the house, along with some guests feeling a choking sensation when walking up or down the stairs. The museum caretakers at one point had to forcibly seal all of the windows shut permanently, as they mysteriously kept opening on their own. The silhouette of a woman can sometimes be seen by passers-by on the street, up in the second-story windows.
Baby Thomas Jr., who passed away in the house, is alleged to be one of the spirits in the home, as his cries, giggling, and tiny footsteps can sometimes be heard, even when no babies were in the home. A young woman can sometimes be seen on the second floor of the house, who many believe to be Violet, the young heartbroken daughter of the Whaleys, who committed suicide after her husband abandoned her. She spent most of her time on the second floor, locked away in her room by herself in the years leading up to her death. These areas of the house are known to be unusually cold in temperature when her presence is felt. Thomas Whaley, the family patriarch, has been seen all throughout the house, but mainly at the top of the staircase, wearing his frock coat and top hat. Guests can sometimes smell cigar smoke while in the home, which is considered to be a sign of his presence. Thomas loved smoking cigars.
The late June Redding, who was the former curator of the Whaley House Museum, said, quote, "We had a little girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, who waved to a man she said was standing in the parlor. We couldn't see him, but often children's sensitivity is greater than an adult's," end quote. One visitor reported to see Mr. Whaley, quote, "clad in frock coat and pantaloons," end quote. The face turned away from her, and suddenly he faded away entirely. Anna Whaley has been reported mostly in the downstairs rooms or in the garden. The scent of French perfume can sometimes be detected in the home, which was Anna's signature scent. Regis Philbin of Regis and Kathy Lee and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire fame got his start in San Diego in the early 1960s as a local news anchor. In 1964, he was part of a seance conducted one night in the Whaley House as part of a segment for a local television show. He and his friend Hans Holzer and psychic Sybil Leek were part of this seance, and according to them, Yankee Jim Robinson, along with several other spirits, were contacted. At around 2:30 a.m. on that night in the Whaley House, he was shocked and horrified by what he saw. Regis Philbin recalled, quote, "All of a sudden, I noticed something on the wall. There was something filmy white. It looked like an apparition of some kind. I got so excited I couldn't restrain myself. I flipped on the flashlight, and nothing was there but a portrait of Anna Whaley, the long dead mistress of the house," end quote. As for whether he believes in the paranormal, Regis said, quote, "You know, a lot of people poo-poo it because they can't see it, but there was something going on in that house," end quote. So are you familiar with who Regis Philbin is? Do you know who Regis Philbin is? Have you ever seen Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
We have our own version of that show, man.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we have our own.
So Regis Philbin was the original guy who did that show. So he was the very first host of that show, and then I guess it spread around to other countries too. But yeah, he was the guy who had his own experience in the Whaley House. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't know that he saw a ghost in the Whaley House.
Some people report seeing apparitions that do not seem to fit any of the known Whaley's family. For instance, one visitor in the courtroom said, quote, "I see a small figure of a woman who has a swarthy complexion. She is wearing a long full skirt reaching to the floor. The skirt appears to be a calico or gingham. Small print. She has a kind of cap on her head, dark hair and eyes, and she is wearing gold hoops in her pierced ears. She seems to stay in the room, lives here, I gather," end quote. The house was rented out to numerous tenants over the years, so it may not be surprising that other spirits reside in the home. Another spirit who is reportedly sighted from time to time is that of a little girl who is usually seen in the dining room. Legend has it that she was a playmate of the Whaley's children who died in a tragic accident, breaking her neck on a low-hanging clothesline in the backyard. However, records cannot confirm this story, so it remains a mere legend.
The Whaley family dog has also been spotted in the house. A parapsychologist reported having seen a spotted dog, like a fox terrier, that ran down the hall with his ears flapping and into the dining room. The Whaleys once owned a terrier named Dolly, and the dog is said to lick and brush up against visitors' legs. Even prior to any of the Whaley family's deaths, Thomas Whaley himself reportedly told the local newspaper, the San Diego Union, that soon after he and his family moved in, heavy footsteps could be heard moving throughout the home, sounding as if made by the boots of a large man. He himself concluded that it was the ghost of Yankee Jim. These disembodied footsteps would scare the Whaley family all throughout their time living there. And even today, the ghost of Yankee Jim Robinson is by far the strongest presence in the home, according to ghost hunters and people who have worked in the Whaley House Museum.
Another source stated that Karine Lillian Whaley, the last surviving member of the original Whaley family, had been convicted. Блять, опять convicted нахуй. Another source stated that Karine Lillian Whaley, the last surviving member of the original Whaley family, had been convinced that the ghost of Yankee Jim haunted the house that she lived in up until her death in 1953. A visitor to the museum in 1962 mentioned that, quote, the ghost had driven her family from their visit there more than 60 years earlier. Her mother was unnerved by the phantom walking noise and the strange way the windows unlatched and flew up, end quote. Aside from ghostly apparitions themselves, many objects inside the home itself had been moved or manipulated on their own, such as the windows opening by themselves, which we mentioned previously. The music room's chandelier beginning to swing back and forth, just like in that song, man. And lights turning on and off without explanation. And sometimes there is even an odd mist that appears to linger inside of the house.
So, in my personal experience, I once heard a story from someone that I knew as a kid who had been in the Whaley House at night, and they witnessed the benches in the courtroom begin to shake violently. It's anecdotal on my part, but everyone knows somebody with a story, it seems.
Benches?
So, I believe when you walk in through the front door and you turn left, there's a courtroom. If I'm remembering this correctly, I was like 10 years old the last time I went inside the Whaley House. But you walk in, you turn left. There's a big little. It's not even a big room. It's actually small for a courtroom. But you go in. There's like a judge's chair up on this like raised platform, and then there's like benches in the room, for like the jury and the people, the other people in the courtroom. But yeah, it's like a full-on courtroom, and like I said, they even held court there last year. So moving on. The Whaley House has been called America's most haunted house by multiple sources, including Life magazine and the Travel Channel. It was even officially recognized as haunted by the U.S. Commerce Department in the 1960s, and it's been featured in countless ghost hunting and paranormal-themed television shows, such as Fact or Fake, Paranormal Files, which we referred to in episode number 1 of our podcast, and Ghost Adventures. To this day, the Whaley House remains both a spooky enigma and a treasure of San Diego. Do the ghosts of the Whaley family, Yankee Jim Robinson, and others still reside in the house? Or are people just tripping? What are your thoughts, man?
So the first thing that comes to my mind, man, is that it doesn't sound... I mean, terrible things happened there, but it doesn't sound too sinister,
No, it doesn't sound too sinister. It's not purported to be like evil spirits haunting it necessarily, but people believe that there are spirits there. It's not like a demonic kind of spirit possession type poltergeist activity. There are some like objects that move on their own, allegedly, but it's not like some evil shit happening in the house. But when you listen to the people that have experiences there, it's usually them seeing some sort of a ghostly apparition. They feel like, for example, an interesting thing is feeling the family dog lick their leg, and they look down and there's no dog there. Or the wind. Okay, so an interesting fact about the house is that the windows used to be able to be opened. Like they would be latched, and then they would suddenly unlatch and then fly open. So the caretakers of the house, they actually had to permanently bolt the windows shut so that they couldn't be opened anymore, because the windows would just randomly unlatch and then swing open by themselves. So they had to put an end to that somehow. Some other stuff that happens in the house: people on the street sometimes report seeing an apparition of a woman in the second story window, which is probably Violet Whaley, who killed herself, her. And then her presence is also associated with like temperature drops in the house.
But it was all subjective. It wasn't measured, right?
Well,
not as far as we know. I mean,
what do you mean by measured?
Like, did they bring the freaking thermometer or something?
Oh, I'm not sure, honestly.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody has, but everyone says like they walk into a certain area, it feels way colder there or something.
It's their experience. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's their experience, but Also, people sometimes smell cigar smoke in the house. Thomas Whaley was a big cigar smoking guy. Anna Whaley, she wore some sort of a lavender perfume, I believe. And people in the Whaley house sometimes smell the scent of lavender perfume. It was some fancy French perfume that she liked to wear, and people can still smell that in the house sometimes. And then sometimes people can hear a baby crying, which people assume that it's Thomas Jr. who passed away when he was a baby. So it's a lot of weird shit. And then Yankee Jim is the most prominent spirit in the house. He was not a part of the Whaley family. He was the guy who got hanged in the spot where the house was later built on top of. So Yankee Jim's spirit is often heard as simply loud, thudding footsteps of what seem to be a heavy man walking around with boots inside of the house on the hardwood floor. So that's how his spirit kind of shows itself to people. And also, some people say that when they're walking up the stairs at a certain point, they can feel like a choking sensation on their neck, which would be kind of, how he died. The way he died was, I would not wish that on my worst enemy. So he was going to be hung in the gallows, but you don't choke to death normally when you get hung in the gallows. You drop, and then the force of the drop breaks your neck. But he was too tall. So he was barely too tall. So he survived the drop because he was too tall, and then he just laid there on the rope, basically choking to death for 30 minutes while his toes were just grazing the ground.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
That's brutal. So I would want to ask you, man, what do you make of all of this? Do you have any thoughts about this the phenomenon that gets reported at the Whaley House?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about maybe a couple of similar examples.
Okay.
I know maybe it will bring more light into this mystery. Yeah, first of all, I would like to talk about one place in Russia. It's probably not a couple of places like that, but that's the place I heard about it. It's in Karelia, which is in northwest of Russia, close to Finland. And there has been discovered mass grave of the people who were just killed during the repressions and stuff. And from what I heard and seen on the videos and stuff, it's super quiet there. It's in the forest, but no birds are singing and stuff. If you watch the videos, it's just
eerily quiet.
It's super quiet. But it's it's in the forest, right? So the birds, they're supposed to
So it's almost like a dead zone in the forest?
Yeah, it's like a dead zone in the forest. I think allegedly, I'm not sure about the number, but somewhere, don't quote me on that, but somewhere around 1,500 people were killed there. And it's been many years, how many, 80 or something, I'm not sure, but it's been a long time, but it's still it's a dead zone. It's super quiet, right?
Right.
So it's that's I have no answer why it's still quiet, because it's I don't know.
So I would want to ask you, do you think that the ghostly phenomenon, do you think that it's a real phenomenon that exists outside of the minds of humans, or do you think that it's just all kind of in our heads, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. What I think about it, I'll probably want to give another example of my friend who told me a story. We'll leave him, her, anonymous.
Okay,
but
let's call him Jim.
Jim, yeah, okay, Jim, or like a normal Russian name, right? A regular Russian name.
Oh, he's Russian.
Yeah, Jim is okay.
All right, how about Vladimir?
Okay, Vladimir. Okay. Vladimir. So he told me the story. Then, then he would go back home, and sometimes at night he would hear a cracking on the floor, resembling the footsteps and stuff. And they believed it was their grandfather. But the interesting thing about it is that the kid of his brother, he actually would talk to that thing, and he was
So the little kid could actually see him.
Yeah, they would notice kid talk to, like, they thought the kid was talking to himself and stuff. He was just like mumbling some stuff, and they would ask the kid like, "Hey, who are you talking to?" And he would go, "Oh, just grandpa." So that was kind of,
That's fucking scary, dude.
Scary, yeah.
But that's a very common theme. I've heard many people talk about that kind of thing. Like when little kids start talking to them, they talk to their quote unquote imaginary friend that turns out to be somebody who actually existed, but no longer exists.
Yeah, I guess it's going back to the question, like you asked, if it's a part of the our mind, or is it like a real thing? Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to say. But I guess if we look, why, it's probably a part of the way the mind works, and with the development of reason and rationality through time, through like not just through history, but as you grow, like from child to the adult, your representations of these things, they just like kind of change and stuff. Or I don't know if it's clear.
I don't know if that can really explain him knowing who grandpa was, and he's just like talking to the grandpa or whatever.
Yeah.
And footsteps are being heard in the house too.
Yeah, for sure. But maybe they were kind of talking about it. Like, I mean, the adults in the house. So
you think that because they were talking about this, that he? Yeah, I see what you're saying, man. But I don't think I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way that certain kids' minds work, I think they're actually more sensitive to certain stuff. I don't think that they're making this up in their head through any sort of imagination.
Yeah,
I think they are experiencing something real, whether that's detectable by the adults around them or not. Like, man, I don't want to rehash episode 2 that we did, but I've seen some shit too that I can't explain rationally. To this day, like, I still don't know how to explain it, but I know that it happened. And it's really hard to say what this all means. But I think there's certain things in this world that can't be explained through, like the lens of the scientific method as we know it. I think there's more to humans than flesh and blood, if that makes sense.
For sure.
I think there's something more. I don't think that we're simply meat machines. I think there's more to us than that. And I think that the nature of reality is, it's something that we might not even physically be capable of ever completely understanding. So I think there's something definitely here. I think there's something to this. And as for the Whaley House in particular, I mean, I think there's certain locations in this world that have had far more horrifying things happen in than the Whaley House. But there's something about, I mean, maybe the horror and the suffering that Yankee Jim went through ripped open some sort of, I don't know, man. It's going to sound crazy, but some kind of portal or something that his presence has just lingered there. And then the people who have died within the vicinity, he's kind of acted like this gravitational center for everyone who's died in that area. And now this energy there is like collecting people's souls or something. It's either that, or it's like some sort of a ripple in time, like the fabric of space time, where the past is like bleeding into the present at certain moments. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's either one of those two things, where the past is somehow folding into the present at certain moments, where this certain geographic area is like bleeding into the present somehow. God damn, it sounds crazy, but
Yeah, but
that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, it's gonna time, past and present. Yeah, but I think I would like to like reiterate the point I mentioned about the kids and old people. I think. Yeah, I'm gonna mention Jung again, but it's a different book.
Okay, so
but it's not gonna be a quote.
Oh, you haven't mentioned Jung in a long time, so
Yeah,
I'll give you a pass.
Okay. It's not gonna be a quote, and I don't remember if I'm gonna like, follow his ideas exactly, but it's gonna be inspired by his ideas.
Okay, go on.
So I think in his book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, I think it was the name of the book. He went on the discussion how the not everyone is modern. Like to be modern, like most of the people are not actually modern. To be modern, you gotta take on, you gotta go through all the path, all the like civilization went. But even though you live in the modern time, it might not be that you or me or everyone else is actually modern. In his definition, to be modern, you gotta like integrate your like primal drives, like your aggression, your sexual drives, and some people, I guess they don't do that, and then they go and live in kind of mythological kind of life, which is actually is like kind of ancient thing, but they still go on with that because it's like it's the way the psyche works. It's maybe like the way of the least resistance. And then yeah, I think the kids, they might be like, then they see the ghosts and stuff, they might be like a really good representation of that because their rational faculty is just developing. I think. And then but like you said, I also believe that there is more than rationality to people, definitely. But I'm not sure that the ghosts and these things are a part of that more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you're not certain if this ghostly phenomenon actually comes from humans, like for example, the dead, like the people of, like the spirits of the dead, basically. Is that what you're saying? You think that this is more of a psychological phenomenon?
Yeah, it's psychological phenomena, and it's yeah, I don't want to sound like judgmental, but it's like an ancient phenomenon. It's the way the people long ago fought and felt like with the and some people in the modern time they do that. Like many people, like they still believe in ghosts. They would like buy some flowers or whatever to please the ghosts. Recently, I watched the movie, like a little documentary about Thailand, and they still buy, like, their flower markets are mostly for ghosts, not for the
not for people,
not for like ladies and stuff. They would buy flowers for ghosts, and it's like, it's just, yeah, it's a part of human. It's definitely a part of human experience, but I think it's probably psychological. Like if you want to please the ghosts, in a way you're pleasing the destiny. You pleasing the you trying to control the unknown.
Yeah.
You're not confronting it with like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. Maybe I'm gonna die, and it would bring like a lot of anxiety and fear, and you just don't know what the hell is gonna happen. But instead, you can, like, please the ghost, the ghost. I'm not saying it's a bad way or something. I'm just saying it's just.
So how would you explain like objects moving by themselves, like the windows unlatching and then flying open? How would you explain something like that? Or, I mean, how would you explain the feeling of getting your leg licked by the family dog? Or, you know what I mean? Like there's more to it than even like visual sightings or auditory sightings. There's there's other types of phenomenon associated with this house and this phenomenon. So what do you make of that?
Do you remember when the Luke Skywalker went to the
Jesus Christ, man! You're gonna make a Star Wars reference?
Yeah.
All right, Mitch, just go for it.
In the Empire Strikes Back, he went to the cave on the Dagobah, where he. I think it's not going to be a spoiler for anyone at this point, right?
Yeah, you had like 45 years to go see it.
Yeah.
I think it's fine.
Where he confronted the Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And it was like actually him.
So what does that have to do with it?
I'm not sure. I just wanted to talk about it. No. I just mean, yeah. You gotta think, what does it have to do with that, man? I think something. There is some connection, definitely.
I think you're trying to hide behind some philosophical question rather than trying to answer the question directly. You're trying to answer the question with a question.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
I'm gonna hold your ass to the fire here, and I'm gonna say, how do you explain windows opening by themselves? Not just swinging open like the wind.
Yeah.
But the latch is flying up and then the window's opening.
I would ask, where is the footage, man?
Okay, so okay. No, good question.
Yeah.
Fuck. I wish I prepared this, but there are also like some photos taken inside the Whaley House of, like strange stuff, like half-formed apparitions of people, and
there are some pictures.
Yeah. And photographic evidence, to me it's like not that big of a deal, because it could be anything. It's such an open-ended question here.
Okay, yeah, apart from all of that, I have a question. How much do you need to pay to enter the house again?
It's like $13, I think. Yeah,
$13.
That's what I read online. I mean, yeah. Why?
Somehow, it reminded me of the King of the Hill episode I watched.
Another King of the Hill episode reference.
Like maybe yesterday or the day before yesterday, we watched an episode about the history of Ireland. I don't know if you've seen it.
You and Peter, or
yeah.
Okay.
Then they found out that Ireland was a harlatan before that, and it was like many prostitutes lived there and stuff like that. Do you remember that episode?
I don't know if I remember that one or not, but go on.
Yeah, they had like a new mayor who wanted to promote Ireland, so they'll have more tourists, and they decided to start the freaking adult industry movie festival there or something like that. And yeah, they used that history to draw like more tourists and stuff. Okay. Somehow this thing kind of reminded me of that. Do you think that it?
So you think it might be a money grab?
Could be a money grab, even though the history is real, but this time.
No, I think it's certainly possible, but I think that I would have to go into the finances of it, how much money this place is pulling in on a yearly basis, but that's a really good question. It could be partially inspired by the money, but I just think there are too many people who have had experiences in this house, including Regis Philbin, who, if you don't trust Regis Philbin, I mean, who can you trust, honestly? So, yeah, tons. And like I said, every San Diegan, if they haven't had an experience in the Whaley House, they know somebody who has.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to, like, easily dismiss any of those, because like for the Asian, like even for some tribes nowadays who believe in ghosts, I think I read in some book, was it like Discovery of Unconscious? I'm not sure, but like some methods, like for example their healing methods, they actually like work and stuff on like unconscious level, but they work. I don't know if they
healing methods.
Yeah, like the shaman healing method.
Yeah.
Like they would go and like heal you in some like shamanistic way, perform a ritual on you, and then you kind of believe in that stuff. I think I'm going a little bit out.
No,
of our way, but-
you are going off road a little bit here, and I need to like bring you
Yeah,
back
bring me
a little
back,
bit.
man. Bring me
All right,
back.
so just to be clear, I think that you don't believe in ghosts. You don't believe that these are the actual spirits of dead people. Am I correct in saying that?
But I do believe that they have power, like psychological
like-
power.
But is it a psychological power that's like based on an external force, or is it a psychological power that's only within the individual experiencing it?
It is in individual and collective experience, but it's not an objective thing. It's subjective and like collectively subjective.
Okay, that makes sense. But all right, so just assume for a moment that ghosts are a real phenomenon that is not that it's something that's happening externally and not just in the head of the witness.
Mm-hmm.
What would your guess be as to the nature of these things and these experiences if they are
If they were real.
if they were due to some external force, whether that be a spirit of a dead person or some sort of a ripple in the space-time continuum where the past bleeds into the present? You know what I mean? Like, what would your number 2 choice be in this?
Like you said, if it's the kind of thing like past bleeding into the present, I would say it's some examples of the like extreme excruciating pain or suffering. That first thing that would come to my mind, like something like that. Like in our
So it's some sort of like a negative energy that lingers in a certain area that sort of it just stays in this area and it affects the vicinity. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah. Just like the story I told in the beginning
about the mass graves.
Yeah. Then it's still quiet there, so it's probably like some super negative event.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear here. In my opinion, I don't think that this is just a psychological thing. I think that this is a real phenomenon. I had my own experience with some weird ghostly shit. I don't know if it's a ghost or not, or if you can call it a ghost. Go back to episode 2 if you haven't listened to episode 2 already, where I tell my story. I don't know what the answer is here, but I don't think that this is merely a psychological phenomenon. I think that there's something there, some sort of a weird energy that still lingers, whether that's like Yankee Jim's negative energy that just lingered there and then caused the rest of the family members to linger there as well. And then all these other people who may have died in the location also started to linger there.
But then I have a weird but a big question there. If if it's just a psychological phenomena like on the mass scale, it still affects the reality, right? So it's kind of real.
Well, yeah, you can make that argument too, but when I say real, I mean like objectively real. Yeah, correct.
But if it's going on the mass scale, I mean it's kind of weird, but it in a way it makes it objectively real, just like those healing rituals in the tribes that they perform. Work.
I see what you're saying, Ben, but I want to be clear in saying that I think that it's more than just the human psychology at work. I think there's something more to it. And I think that there's more to our reality than what we can imagine. I think there's just the nature of our reality. I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface of. I think it goes super deep. And I think there's a lot more to us as humans than science can explain. And that's where I stand. I don't have any of the answers though. That's the problem. I don't know what the nature of our reality is. I don't claim to know. I just think that there's more out there. You know, when I saw that fucking shadow thing move and then set off the baby doll toy, episode 2, go back and listen to it if you haven't already. I know weird shit like this exists. I've seen it. I've witnessed it with my eyes, my ears, and it's one of those things, man, it doesn't make sense, but I saw it. I know it's real. And I don't know how to convince anyone else that it's real. It's just something that you're going to have to experience for yourself. And I don't know if what I saw was a ghost or like a spirit of a dead person or something like that, but I do know that there's weird shit that exists outside of what we can normally see in our day-to-day world. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I see. I understand your point, but I think I'm not sure if the ghosts and the particular ghosts at that place are. I don't know. I don't know if they're part of that story. I just don't know, man. Just don't know, man. But the way I see it still is like, even if it's just like psychological construct on the mass scale, it's still kind of.
You think that it's almost magical in its own way?
Yeah. It's almost magical.
Even if you believe that it is all psychological.
Yeah, because it's going on like on the mass scale, and it's been going on for a long time.
All right, so what do you think like out of a scale of 1 to 100, what do you think the odds of this being a purely psychological phenomenon is versus some real, tangible, external phenomenon that exists not just inside of the human mind, but also outside of it?
So
like, for example, like 60% chance that it is X, 40% chance that it is Y.
I'll give it like gun to my head, right? Again.
Yeah, gun to your head.
I'll give it like 95. Okay, 90 to 95% psychological, 5% that it's actually might have happened.
Okay, so let me challenge you. So that mass grave in Russia, how would you explain that? If none of the birds are chirping, it's really quiet in that area, unusually quiet.
No. But we're talking about that house, right? Not the.
I know, but right now we're just kind of talking about the phenomenon in general.
Oh, okay. If you challenge me that in the.
Yeah, would you explain that in a psychological way?
No, it's this one would be way harder. This one I probably wouldn't be able to like even give you the percentages, because
would that chip away a little bit at your 95% certainty?
Definitely. But
so would you lower that to like 90 or like 85?
Yeah, maybe even 70 or something. I don't know, man.
Damn, okay.
But I mean, it's really hard to say because it's super quiet there. It's just. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the paranormal phenomenon, like ghosts and stuff like that. It's not my forte. I'm much more interested in like other types of unsolved mysteries, like UFO, alien type stuff, space, the nature of our reality. Someone's at the door. Hold on. And we're back. All right. Where were we?
Where we're given the percent points.
Okay, yeah, all right. So for me, I'm more like I don't know what the nature of ghosts are, but I think that it's not purely a psychological phenomenon that the individual experiences. I think that there's something external about it, if you know what I mean. So I would say there's something external. I'm like 80% sure that it's something external and not just purely within the mind of the experiencer.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say 20% purely psychological. I think that's generous of me to say that, because that means there's a 20% chance that I'm full of shit.
Why do you mean you're like full of shit?
No, I'm just saying like the whole shadow people. I'm not going to rehash it here, but
yeah.
I'm not going to rehash it, but yeah, I'm giving myself a 20% chance that I'm full of shit.
Yeah, we're not going to rehash it, but then we talked about it. Yeah, even if was just psychological, it's kind of too much, right?
I do think that there's something to be said about the negative energy when it comes to these places where somebody dies some sort of horrific death, or there's some tremendous sadness that goes along with somebody's life in a certain area. where these energies can kind of linger. And I think that there's something to be said about that. And I don't know how it would work precisely, but I think that that's the key to understanding these sort of haunted locations is some sort of a negative energy that still lingers.
Yeah, the extreme suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Extreme suffering.
Well, man, do you have anything else you want to add to this discussion?
Yeah, we didn't came like to the decisive conclusion, but I think it's really hard to. Right,
There's no way we can decisively say what this is, man. It's so open-ended.
Yeah, it's open-ended, but we had a good discussion, I think.
Yeah, man. All right, man. Do you have any apologies, shout-outs, clarifications to make, anything like that?
I want to apologize to any believers in ghosts and ghosts themselves.
So are you apologizing to me?
No, man, that's not what you.
So that's not an apology to me.
No,
so okay, you're apologizing to everyone except me, right?
I gotta think about another apology.
No, it's fine, man. I like to give a shout out to Regis Philbin. He died a few years ago, so R.I.P. Regis Philbin, and also shout out to JV's Taco Shop because I fucking miss your burritos. All right, man. I think it's time to get out of here. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Помните, ребята, истина прячется в тени. Вместе мы найдем ее.
This is Super Mystery Bros.
but the thing is, the dog's ears moved, you know. And then I was like barking and shit. I was like, and the dog's ears went like, so it kind of, you know, we had the connection kind of thing. And then it actually stopped for a couple.
What did you say to the dog?
Like something like, let me try to remember. Something like that.
So translated, what does that mean?
Like, hey doggy, what's going on? You know.